So, welcome everyone to the European Medra User Group webinar. I hope you can see me now. So I will be your moderator for today. I'm Martin Menke, and this meeting will be shared by me, but it is thanks to the Msso, to Liz Thomas, and to Brian O'Hare, who will provide the technical support and that made this presentations here possible. We try to make this as interactive as possible, so you can, and we really look forward to your questions, and you can do these questions via the question part of the chat. So you just pull out the chat part of your control panel. That's in the upper right of your screen usually, and you simply type your question into the question box, as you can see here in this slide. You need to send it naturally so that we can see it, and we will be answering your questions at every presentation when it's correlated with the presentation, but we have a large kind of final Q&A session in the end. So you can ask any questions on Medra and about the presentations also in general, except what we usually do not answer is concrete questions on how to code certain things. And even though I think we have plenty of time for your questions, we may not be able to answer all your questions, I submit. So please be patient with us there. What are the most frequent questions we get? Actually, well, the traditional ones, can you get a copy of the slides? Yes, you can. They will be online, the same with the webinar itself. It is recorded, and we will put it on the medra.org user group section. And in addition to that, you actually do have the presentations and the materials already under the section handouts available to download from within this tool here. So who are we actually? Who is the European Industry Medra User Group Steering Committee? You see the people here who are very engaged to provide these types of webinars, but also is interested in Medra in general, which you will see in one of our presentations. We'll try to get basic data on what you're doing with Medra and all these, but that will be provided by Ian. There's Moril, Jutta, Anna, Barry, Jane, Claudia, Felix, me. I talked about Ian and Christina, who meet regularly at least once a month and talk about things, what could be helpful for you as users. So don't hesitate whenever you have interesting questions or ideas, what we could do for you, just let us know. And with that, we would like to know a little bit more about who are you, actually. So we have prepared some polling questions to you.
I'm launching the poll now.
To you, Liz.
Please respond. Okay, I'm closing the poll and sharing the results. Martin, can you see the results?
I can see that in the pane, but I can't see anything. I think I'm still presenting.
I'll read them out to you.
Yep.
Africa, there was 2% response. Asia or Oceania, 9% response. Europe, 65%. Latin America and the Caribbean, 4%. And North America, 20%.
So, yes, thank you. So most of you are from within Europe. Well, we are a European group, but we also try to make it as good as for you all around the globe. And so the next part would be the 20% North America. So welcome very much. And I'm and Latin America also 4%. And welcome also to all you people who stayed up late in Asia or Oceania. I know it's maybe probably quite late in case you're in Japan or in Australia. I think India is potentially still quite feasible. But yes, and they're 2% Africa. So our neighbors to the south also participate here, being in the same range of time. So next question, please. So all welcome.
Please respond. What type of organization do you work for? Closing the poll and sharing the results. Pharmaceutical development, manufacturer, or distributor, 51%. Medical device development organization, 3%. CRO, 20%. Regulatory authority, 4%. And other, 23%.
Good. So, well, again, welcome to you all. About half of them are working in pharmaceutical companies and 20% in CROs. And I'm always very much interested in who potentially may be the others. But I'm lucky to see, or happy to see, that there are also medical device people are there and regulators, because Medra does play a role in medical devices as well, doesn't it? And well, it's for regulatory affairs anyhow. So thank you.
Martin, you might want to switch to the next couple of slides.
Oops, sorry, this was...
There. And I'm launching the poll. You may respond. And I'm closing the poll, and the results are drug safety, pharmacovigilance, 54%, clinical research or operations, 3%, coding, 27%, statistics, programming, informatics, or data management, 12%, and other, 4%.
So again, welcome. As me, half of you or more, a little bit more than half of you is drug safety and pharmacovigilance. But yes, there are coding people and statistic people also here, and I hope will be of interest for you as well. So thank you for telling us who you are, and to that, actually, we go into the agenda. So what do we have for you today? And that is starting with Dr. Judy Harrison. She'll give you a general Medra update. The next item would be our medical coding survey. This is presented by Ian from Vertex, and that is actually on gathering very general data of how you code with and what's your technology on using Medra and the WHO drug dictionary as well. And then we have a talk from Martina Fiel from Bayer. She will talk about the automation in the Bayer medical coding process. And after that, we have a longer Q&A session, open house, where you can ask us anything except of coding questions. With that overview, I will hand over to Judy, who is the Chief Medical Officer at the MSO. Probably all of you know her. She's doing that for 18 years now. I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, Judy, but I think the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martin, for that kind introduction. As always, it's a pleasure to be part of the Medra user group and to engage in this communication with you, the Medra community. So Liz, if you could make me presenter, please. Thank you. Okay, so I've got a number of topics to discuss with you today. So in the interest of time, I will go to the first one, and that is Metra Translations. The Medra Management Committee has approved additional translations of Medra into languages that are used in the European Economic Area. This will mean that we have a total of 17 additional European languages to be phased into Medra over the course of the next few years. And this is to support an initiative regarding electronic product information. So these translations will solely be of the Medra terms themselves and web-based language interfaces, but not the supporting documentation, the introductory guide, the SMQ introductory guide. They will not be translated into those languages. Our current efforts in this year are focused on Greek, Latvian, Maltese, Polish, and Swedish. They're currently in development, and there has been a little bit of a delay due to the pandemic. We work very closely with the regulatory authorities in those countries, and they are understandably distracted by the pandemic, so we expect those languages to roll out in the first part of 2022. The remaining languages of the remaining 17 will be phased in over the next few years. The Medra Management Committee has also approved the development of an Arabic translation of Medra, and I think this fills an important gap in providing Medra to the wider user community. There are currently 25 languages who identify Arabic as their official or co-official language. This translation will include all of the Medra terms and the full user documentation. And we're working to identify the translation vendor and collaborate with the Saudi FDA to develop that translation in 2022. Next, an update on the ICD Medra mappings. You might have heard from us recently that the Medra Management Committee has supported that the MSO pursue the development and future maintenance of an ICD-10 to Medra mapping. This is the core international version of ICD-10. We're pleased to announce that thanks to my colleagues at the MSO, they've worked very hard to complete a map of ICD-10 to Medra. This is based currently on Medra version 23.1, but the eventual production release will obviously be updated to the most recent release of Medra. There are 22 chapters in ICD-10, and we have mapped 20 of them. We have excluded the external causes of morbidity and mortality, as well as the chapter devoted to factors influencing health status and contact with health services. These terms are largely out of the scope of Medra and don't really fit with the pharmacovigilance use cases of the map. I think this map will be welcomed by the Medra user community. We're currently engaging in a very important step, which is to have the completed map being reviewed by the WHO. We don't know when the map is going to be released. We'll be able to communicate further with you in the future about the timelines and the likely formats of the map. There are obviously a lot of review steps that will go before we're in the position to be able to produce this map to the user community. Looking into the future also, the Metra Management Committee has supported exploration with WHO of how we could develop and maintain a map between ICD-11 and Medra. And that is intended to be a bi-directional map between the two terminologies. Again, more information will be communicated in the future. Next, an update on standardized Medra queries. In Medra version 24.1 in September, we had a new SMQ go into production that was sexual dysfunction. So it brings the total of level 1 SMQs in production to 109. We're also actively engaged in developing a new topic for neurodevelopmental delay. So this is delays in reaching key milestones regarding language acquisition, cognitive skills, motor skills in infants, possibly related to maternal exposures to medical products during pregnancy. As you'll appreciate, it's a very complex topic, and we're currently evaluating the SMQ with a variety of regulatory and industry experts from around the world to how best we can approach this. The challenge is that there are not a lot of Medra-coded pharmacovigilance databases where these types of milestones are recorded, and where the maternal exposures are also recorded. They're more likely to be found in epidemiological databases. So we're working actively on this. I think we will be able to communicate later with you as we proceed through the development process when we might be able to go into production. Just recently also, the Medra Management Committee has approved the Msso to develop a new SMQ for non-infectious myocarditis and pericarditis. This is obviously a very hot topic with the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines, but it's also an important adverse event associated with a variety of other drugs as well. We're aiming to develop this in an expedited fashion based on medical judgment. We're engaging a review by external experts from regulatory authorities and industry, and we hope to be able to go into production with this SMQ in Medra version 25.0 in March next year. Now a brief update on the points to consider documents. I'm pleased to say that we have released a Russian translation of the full PTC documents. This translation was performed by Dr. Yelena Obenhina, who's our Msso Russia support person who's located in Moscow. And she worked on the translation in collaboration with Roskrasnadzor, which is the Russian regulatory authority. This is already available on our website, as you can see from the screenshot there. It's based, like the other ones in production at the moment, on the 2021 version. In concert with the other full translations that we have of the PTC documents, Chinese, English, Japanese, Korean, and Spanish, the Russian translation will be updated in March 2022 based on 25.0. We're pleased to have these translations of the full PTC documents available. Our local support people are native speakers of all of these languages and can conduct training based on these PTC documents. Also an update on the points to consider companion document. You may be aware that we are in the process of drafting a new section on product manufacturing and quality system issues. In the current release of the document 2.0, we already have a section on distributed product quality issues. So those are products that are already available in the marketplace for consumers and patients to use. This new section will focus earlier on in the development process, so the actual manufacturing process and any quality issues that can occur during that process which might have potential implications for patient safety. Because we don't have a lot of expertise within the Points to Consider working group on product quality, we have gone out to some additional ICH quality experts to obtain their input, and we're currently in the process of reviewing that with them. We aim to post these updated release, which will be the 3.0 version of the document with this new section, in the second quarter next year in English and Japanese. It's been somewhat delayed from the fourth quarter of this year, again, because we need to go out to outside experts and people are distracted from the pandemic. And we need a little bit more time to be able to get this section completed. And now a change in terminology. We don't often talk in our Medra updates about individual terms and changes within the terminology, but I thought this one is important to focus and show how Medra responds to changing nomenclature in the medical world. Just back in September, there was a position statement put out by a variety of infectious disease and pharmacy associations in the US. And that was to have a systematic effort to remove the old terminology, red man syndrome, and replace it with a more medically correct term, which is Vancomycin infusion reaction. And this group suggested that these changes in nomenclature be reflected in things like the electronic health record, training, guidelines, and any types of communications about this particular syndrome. So let's look a little bit more about what that is. So red man syndrome is a particular reaction associated with vancomycin. It's manifested by an itchy erythematous rash that typically involves the face and neck and the upper torso. It's very much associated with the first dose of vancomycin or a too rapid infusion of the dose. So the more medically correct terminology is vancomycin infusion reaction. And this is intended to replace the term red man syndrome, which for indigenous people in North America has racist connotations. And it also implies that this reaction only affects white males, which is clearly not the case. So this change in nomenclature is supported by the FDA in the United States. And also the British National Formulary has an interest in replacing that terminology in all of its documentation. And the MHRA, the UK regulator, also strongly support this initiative. So we clearly needed to make some changes in Medra to reflect this new nomenclature. So we collaborated with those groups in the US to replace the outdated and offensive terminology with the more accurate medical terminology. So you will see these changes implemented in Medra version 25.0. The new PT is vancomycin infusion reaction. We have demoted red man syndrome to a lowest level term. We don't remove it from the terminology or make it non-current because there is a considerable amount of legacy data coded with red man syndrome, so we'll still retain it within the terminology, but it's now reflected at its proper position at the lowest level. The LLT red man was made non-current because on its own it's an ambiguous term. So this little screenshot at the bottom from the web-based browser shows the new terminology that will be reflected in Medra version 25.0. And my last topic is supplemental terms. Supplemental terms are terms that are added to Medra on a daily basis through the MSSO's change request process. They are not reflected in Medra until the twice-yearly updates in March and September, but they are placed in the terminology as supplemental terms. And I will show you how users can access them and actually view them in advance of the next official release. The MSSO is currently drafting some ideas for the Medra Management Committee to consider about how we might use supplemental terms. And these really have been thrown into the limelight after the pandemic prompted an extra release of Medra version 23.0 in April 2020. we needed to put out an emergency release to be able to reflect new COVID-19 terms that people needed for coding and analysis purposes. So that was an entirely separate extra release of the whole terminology. The idea of accessing supplemental terms off-cycle was also discussed at the Medra and Information Technology Blue Ribbon panel on the 10th of September last year. And users can view that recording on our website under the Blue Ribbon panel section on the website. We note that other standards like the Identification of Medicinal Products initiative being conducted in the EU, they're also considering ways to provide access to updates more frequently. And indeed, the idea behind IDMP is that it would be a dynamic terminology that could potentially change on a daily or hourly basis. Now, IDMP is probably a little bit of a different beast from Medra because many of the term lists are probably fairly static, like forms of administration, routes of administration, they probably don't change that much. But clearly this is the way of the future, to have terminologies that are actively evolving, that people could access them if they had a need. So some of the considerations that we are looking at, first of all, use cases. How would people want to access the terms? Would they be using them for coding purposes, analysis purposes, communication between regulatory authorities, for example? But certainly we have the technology backbone behind that, in that we can access these terms on a very frequent basis, hourly, daily, through the Medra APIs. We'd need to also consider the frequency of translation updates. I will show you shortly how we can access the supplemental terms, which we currently make available in English only. But if we make supplemental terms more readily accessible through the Medra APIs, how would we reflect the translations that are done? Potentially, we will have 32 languages in just a few short years. So do we make translations available of supplemental terms as well as the English ones? We'll need to consider versioning releases, even simple things like what do we call a version that comes out on a weekly or 2-weekly basis in between the official releases. How do we number those? So there's clearly a knock-on effect on many other standards, for example, the ICSR standard, clinical trials applications, PSURs, anything where Medra versions are referenced. There will need to be discussion around that. So lots more thoughts and communication to come, and we welcome your ideas, and we'll be certainly exploring this in the future with you. So I thought I'd take the remaining few minutes just to talk about how we can view supplemental terms right now. And I will use the example of COVID-19 breakthrough infection as an example, because we frequently get requests through our help desk. Are you adding a term for breakthrough COVID-19? Are you adding a term for thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, to take two very topical examples? So one way of viewing them is on the downloads page on the Medra website. We post them in a PDF format, as well as the ASCII files. These are the actual Medra terms and their hierarchies on a weekly basis. Now, this is probably the most complicated way of accessing supplemental terms. You need to have a Medra user ID and password to access the downloads page on our Medra website. So these are not easily accessible unless you have that information. And also the PDF format is rather clunky. We have the weekly releases, but we have a running comprehensive changes version for Medra 25.0 that I'm showing you here. I'll just show you what that PDF document looks like. And taking breakthrough COVID-19 as an example, I took that big PDF document and put in the word breakthrough as a search, and I found this change request to add a new PT, breakthrough COVID-19. It was approved, and you can see the MSSO's comment and the final placement. So if you know what you're looking for, you can certainly go to the downloads page, access the posted supplemental files and search for what you want. But now I'm going to show you some easier ways how to view the supplemental terms and find out if the terms that you're interested in have been added. So first I will switch over to the web-based WebCR, which is our web-based change request tool, then show you in the web-based browser, and lastly, the Medra version analysis tool. And I think I will probably have to log in again. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is search CR history. Okay. And I'm going to search for that term breakthrough COVID-19. And this brings me, you can see that it's going to be in 25.0, so it's not in Medra right now, but it will be in 25.0. And here's add a new PT. And here you will find very similar information to what we saw in the PDF file. So it's primary links, secondary links. And if we go back to the previous screen, you'll also see our tool only allows us to put in the primary and one secondary. So we have to do another change request to also link to a third link, which is to vaccination-related complications. So you've been able to find this term in the web-based browser. And just out of interest also, we're engaged in ongoing maintenance of SMQs with supplementals. So when a new term is added to Medra, we also consider whether that term should be added to any of the existing SMQs. So obviously it is eligible for inclusion in the COVID-19 SMQ as a narrow scope term. But like COVID-19 itself, it's also added as a broad search term to the SMQ for opportunistic infections. So that is using our Medra WebCR tool to be able to find terms that will be included in the upcoming release. But again, you need to know what you're searching for. Next one, I will go to the web-based browser. I just need to log in. Now, when you log in, my language is set to English, and the typical default is for the current release, which is 24.1. But I want to look into the future. So I'm going to go over to this area here and select Supplemental English. And the screen will change to this pink color, so you know you're not in an official release of Medra, you're in an upcoming release, supplemental. So this is for 25.0. And again, I will put in that term, breakthrough COVID-19, see if it's in there. And there it is. You'll see the LLT here. And because it's a supplemental term, it has a green dotted box around it, indicating that it is supplemental. And here you can work your way up the hierarchy to find out which terms it's in. Also, an easy way to see its placement in Medra is actually just to click on the term itself, and it will show in this right-hand panel where it is located in the hierarchy. Once I find that term, though, I also like to look from the top down, visualize that in the browser on the left-hand side. So I'm going to right-click on this term, choose Go to Browser. It asks me where I'd like to look at it. I'll look at it in its primary SOC, which is infections. And there, when I click on that term, you can see the PT, the LLT, and also another expression, a synonymous expression, breakthrough SARS-CoV-2 infection, COVID-19 post-vaccine, that means the same thing, and SARS-CoV-2 infection post-vaccine. So I only search for breakthrough COVID-19, but if I use that trick of going to the browser, I can also see the synonymous terms that were added at the same time as LLTs. So again, I'm searching for a very specific term, and I can actually broaden my search a little bit to see just what Medra has been putting in for COVID-19. Now, if I open up these LLTs, we've got 57 of them, and you'll see the supplementals and will be in 25.0, breakthrough COVID-19 is there. We've also got one for COVID-19 heterologous vaccination. So that's receiving a different COVID-19 vaccine to the ones that you had for your first or second vaccination, particularly applicable for boosters, for example. There we'll see COVID-19 post-vaccine, we've already seen that. And here's an interesting one, COVID-19 reinfection. Again, I'd like to see, are there any other terms that have been added around that? I looked for COVID-19, but are there any other in that area? And again, I'm going to go to the browser, pick the PT there. See, we have the PT for COVID-19. And there's that COVID-19 reinfection, but this is interesting here that I see my colleagues have been added a number of terms for the Delta variant, SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant infection, variant of concern infection, and so on. So the web-based browser is very helpful for you to be able to search broadly for new terms that are coming in. Then it's helpful to go over to the browser on the left-hand side and just browse around to see if there are any other new terms being added. So this is helpful, but you really have to sort of know what you're looking for and then browse around and by chance stumble upon things. My last demonstration is going to be with Mvat, because that will show you all of the changes that have been made in Medra. You don't have to just randomly find them by browsing around in the browser. So I'm going to go to login again. And here I'm going to change to the supplemental view. So this is starting for 24.1 and the ending version is supplemental. So that's as of today, what terms are going to be coming up in 25.0. This is updated on a daily basis. It does take a little time to run that report because we have a lot of activity, as you will see, already for 25.0. Our freeze date is on the 1st of December, but we have already added a large number of terms, as you will see. So apologies for this being a little bit slow. There we go. So this summarizes all of the changes from 24.1 to the current day. You'll see we've added nearly 800 new LLTs and 306 new PTs. And any of these we can click on View Detail and we can see alphabetically the new PTs and their hierarchy. I can just scroll down and see if we can find that breakthrough COVID-19. There it is. And just interestingly, of currency changes, we'll be able to confirm that Redman was current and now it has been made non-current. And you can export any of these selections to a spreadsheet to be able to view any of these new changes. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions, but maybe in the interest of time, we should defer those until the end of the presentation. Open Q&A at the end. Are there any quick questions, Liz?
No, there are no questions coming through at this time.
Great. Thank you very much.
Switching back to Martin.
Yes. Hi again. So I would have some questions, but we can take them at the end, definitely. So you hope you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Good. So, well, thank you, Judy, for this really nice overview of what's really coming and what's really hot with the with Medra, all the developments. It's a huge work that's done and really being done. So thank you for that. And with that, we will switch to Ian Slack, who's the Director of Clinical Data Management at Vertex Pharmaceutical Europe Limited. And he will talk about the medical coding survey that we actually created to collect some basic data on medical coding. Over to you, Ian.
Switching to Ian.
Great. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our wide audience today. So, as Martin said, this is all about the medical coding survey. Whilst this is my parent company, the company I work for, Slide Deck, this is actually on behalf of the European Industry Medra User Group Steering Committee in collaboration with the Msso and UMC. And we've developed this survey, which is going to look at benchmarking metrics for Medra and WHO drug medical coding activities. So, why should you be interested in the survey? Well, the world is moving at a very fast pace, and along with it is clinical development in the pharmaceutical industry, and alongside the science, we see lots of innovation in technology as well. Coding systems, browsers, EDC, and because of these changes, we are impacted in our medical coding processes. So our processes need to change as well. And so it's a really good opportunity to take a pause and look at where we are. Medical coding faces challenges as pressure to move faster and leaner continues to grow. And at the same time, drug developers are executing more risk-based assessments. We're looking at different coding data interrogations using custom and standard dictionary searches like custom Medra queries and standardized Medra queries. And we're also looking more and more at interim analysis data to check in on where we are on our clinical trials. And whilst technology continues to advance with multifunctional coding solutions, machine learning, and natural language processing, I think it's really important that we identify where we are in our organizations, what everyone else is doing, and where we can measure ourselves. There's no current recognized industry-wide metrics, cycle times, or technology assessments for medical coding. But we have seen these types of benchmarking metrics published in areas of things like data management and clinical operations. So here's our proposal. So one of the reasons why an industry-wide survey like this hasn't really been attempted before, it became very apparent when we sat down to construct it. Medical coding is very complex, and we do things differently based on our company standards and requirements. And for this reason, we're concentrating this particular survey on benchmarking metrics rather than things like the use of SMQs and CMQs, up-versioning processes and things like that. A second survey is planned for next year, if this goes well, to cover all those types of processes. So we're going to develop this. We've developed this survey to really identify the status of where we are in the industry in terms of our standards and processes, our defined metrics and the way we use technology. And we aim to identify a range of results that we can use then to benchmark as an average, enabling us all to look at that data as an industry to identify ways in which we can get better, to look at where we currently are, and to focus on any challenges if we're not actually using processes or systems, or our processes aren't as efficient as they could be. What can we do to make them better? So we can use the data from the survey within our organizations, but hopefully technology vendors will also sit up and pay attention to the potential gaps and needs. I want to take a note here to say that this survey, when it goes out, this is going to be completely anonymous. So you're not putting your name to anything. You're not entering your name or your organization into the survey. And it's the access to your data that you're entering is only going to be accessible to the select members of the EU Industry Medra User Group Steering Committee, UMC and the MSSO members who have been involved, so that we can actually review and analyze that data. And when we present it, we're going to be presenting just aggregated data when we present it, and you'll see later where we intend to present it, or if we actually publish it in any way. So what can you expect from the survey? As I mentioned earlier, what we do is a complex thing. And obviously MSSO end users and subscribers are not all just performing the same tasks. Like, you know, not everybody is performing Medra coding of clinical trial data, adverse events. So we had to design the survey to make it flexible enough so that we could accommodate the different types of coding that is being performed, and so that everybody could provide some level of feedback and response. We also wanted to include medication coding in our survey, so we partnered up with the UMC, and you'll see more and more partnerships with the UMC and the steering committee in the future. And we wanted to see also how you use technology to see if this has an impact on your metrics. So we're going to be cross-referencing the responses in the survey to the answers given. The other thing that I think is important to recognize is when we sat down to look at this survey and how to design it, we all had different interpretations of language on certain definitions. So we thought, in order to have a more standard response rate from people, is put together some definitions of what certain terminology means, like what is auto-encoding, so that we all can speak the same language. On what you'll see on the top right-hand corner of this screen here is the survey link. You can actually go into that survey link after this presentation and begin your own survey, but wait until the end of the presentation and the end of the webinar to do that. And we're also going to post in the chat this survey link so that you have it, and we'll be widely publicizing the survey link across social media and other various platforms. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at different responses from different types of people to the survey. So you'll have an option to answer the questions if you're performing clinical coding on clinical trials in a clinical database, or if you're performing pharmacovigilance or safety coding, you're going to answer in regard to that. Some systems that we use, or some organizations, perform coding within the same coding system and merge both types of coding together. So they may want to answer based on both the clinical and the safety types of coding. We also designed the survey so that you can answer questions separately for Medra and WHO drug, or again, in some cases, in a combined manner. We wanted to look at the different types of technology out there and see how that corresponds to your process rates and metrics. So by answering the questions and filling out the details of how you use certain things like browsers within your tool or external to your tool, for example, you will be able to correspond that with perhaps your hit rates, your manual coding hit rates, and how long it takes you to code records. And we wanted to make sure that we are able to look at the data across the board, across the industry, so that you could see where you fit in your organization alongside your industry peers. So hopefully some really good information will come out of the results. When the results are presented, organizations, as I said, will be able to compare their internal metrics and technology and process capabilities versus the benchmarking averages. And we can work with vendors as well to demonstrate an appetite for potentially important technology advances, or to get them to perform enhancements to their systems. And as a recent vendor said to me, you know, if one person wants a change, then it's not as impactful as if 10 or 15 sponsors want the same change. They're more likely to make changes to their system if more people want them. So we have to have a voice. And this particular survey could give organizations a voice to influence how we move forward with technology. So on the slide, we talk about how we can look at the data to see where perhaps we're lacking in our efficiencies, or maybe we're ahead of the game, and we can go to our managers and say, hey, look where we are compared to the industry. So there's different ways in which maybe you can influence or celebrate success based on your particular processes and metrics. I've got an example here of where we can use results. Not all organizations are able to do this based on technology or what you're actually collecting, but this is just an example of where perhaps this could be useful in future, and something to maybe think about. So using metrics to forecast resources is something that can be useful. And this example here, I'll just read it out on the slide. If you can estimate the number of coded terms expected per patient in a certain type of study, an example here is 10 codes, which are made up of medical history, adverse events, and concomitant medications. And then you can multiply those codes per patient by the number of patients in the study. So you're using potentially historical information on your therapeutic area to estimate the amount of codes you're expecting, and multiplying that by the number of patients in your study. So 10 codes times 100 patients is 1,000 codes expected across the study. And estimate the number of terms that will then auto-encode. So if you have an auto-encoding hit rate, an average that you've calculated, you know how many terms will automatically code. So here we've got 70%, which is quite good. To get 700 will automatically code. And then we'll have 300 left, which need to be manually coded. So estimate the number of manual codes and then divide that by the number of months duration of the study. So 300 manual codes divided by 3 months equals 100 codes per month in the study. And that will give you an estimate of how much time you might need to dedicate to coding per month on that study. This is all obviously just a ballpark average. You can have obviously recruitment issues and peaks and troughs of data, but you'll get a good average here. So multiply the time to code to estimate the amount of time divided by the resource required for the study. So here I've got my 100 codes per month times by my rate, my manual coding rate, which is 3 minutes, just as an example, and then divide that by 60 minutes in an hour, and I get 5 hours per month. So I'm using my metrics to calculate that I need 5 hours per month of coding time, or my coder's time, to perform work on that particular study. And again, outside of that, you've got your reviews and deliverables and things like that. So this is purely coding resource that I'm calculating here using metrics. Obviously, the quality of the source data will impact your metrics. So you can If you're finding that you're spending more time on coding during that period, it may be because there's a larger number of expected queries per patient. So it will be useful to know how many on average coding queries you're raising per patient. Your auto-encoding hit rate may be below your average because maybe the therapeutic area is more complex, or there's less, the data that's being collected is not as clean. And also the quality of the coding and accuracy or correctness via the error rate means that you're spending more time recoding the data based on errors. So that's just an example here of how we can use the type of data that we'll be collecting in the survey to find use from it. Okay, so the survey itself, and again, there's a little link in the top there if you want to write that down, but Brian will be putting in the chat the actual survey link. And on the slide deck that's in the handout section, that is going to also include a QR code. If you're that technology advanced, you can use the QR code to enter the survey as well. Although I wouldn't recommend using the mobile phone to do that. So in the survey itself, ideally we want one person from each company to respond. So maybe it's worthwhile getting your heads together within your organization and saying, hey, who's going to respond to this survey? Because if we have 20 people from a single company responding, we may skew the results. So ideally, we know we might not get just a single representative. We may get multiple, but we want to try and limit that. So if you can collaborate within your organization to respond from one person, and maybe your organization wants to respond separately for clinical and safety or pharmacovigilance. So one person per area could respond to the survey. Or you could have, as I said earlier, the clinical and the safety data could be together, how you respond. So that could be another one person. And the other thing that's important to recognize is that in the pharmaceutical industry or biotech, we outsource some of the coding. So if you outsource, just think about anything you do internally, not externally taking a CRO information. You're responding based on your own company's standards, processes, and tools. And if you are a CRO, that you're providing responses based on your own standards, processes, and tools as well. The responses we'd like to receive would be based on real or current data and not guessed. I mean, there may be some cases where you have a range of responses. Take the middle point in those responses to provide input into the survey. But ideally, you're collecting metrics. If you don't know your metrics, or if your technology is not allowing you to collect certain metrics, then it's okay, because actually this is a good reason why we could potentially provide output in the results to say we don't have the technology to calculate some of these things in our system, or we're not collecting those types of information or metrics. So if you can't provide real data, then it's okay to just skip or provide a reason why, and that will be useful in our results. In terms of the timeline, the survey is open now, and we're going to leave it open until Friday, end of business, 17th of December. And we're going to, hopefully, that will be a month. We'll send out a sort of reminders on, as I said, on various platforms to keep that survey open and get your responses in by that date. Nice project before Christmas to complete. And then what happens to the results? What we're going to do? So between the collecting the final results and presenting the data, we'll be chopping up the data, analyzing it, looking at it from different angles, and putting it together in a presentation, which we're going to deliver at the EU Industry Medra User Group Spring Meeting, which will be announced fairly soon, but it will be March or potentially April next year. when we do that. Okay, my final slide, I just want to say a big thank you to all the contributors of the putting this together. As I said, it's a collaboration, so thanks from the MSSO to Brian and Jane, and the UMC to Marilena, and also to my colleagues on the EU Industry Medra User Group Steering Committee, Martin and Felix. But I also want to give a big shout out to the anonymous pilot survey group of testers. They knew who they are, who were a pilot group of testers who sort of looked at our initial survey, provided feedback and provided responses so that we could modify it and put it into the format that you will see today. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, and I'll be open to questions either now or at the end of our session.
There is one question. I work for a diagnostics company in the US. Would Ian still want my input on the survey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it doesn't matter. We try to keep this open to all subscribers. So even if you are skipping lots of questions in the survey, answer as much as you can. And there's some free text information, some free text questions in there where you may be able to contribute and provide any feedback that you have that we might find useful. So I would say this is open to all of you.
And there are no more questions at this time. I'm going to switch back to Martin.
Thank you.
Hi, so yes, there was one question and another one that actually has already been answered. The issue on a single coordinated response. Yes, we want, if possible, a single coordinated response, but if you have 2 or 3 systems and processes, we would want those. So if you have clinical trials coding separate from pharmacovigilance, as Ian pointed out, well, you would provide 2 answers, one for each. So that is also a given thing here. Can you see my slides? Am I sharing?
Yes.
Ah, good. So I head on. Please feel free to put more questions into the chat box. But for now, we will proceed to, if it lets me, to our next speaker. That is Martina Fiel from Bayer. She's head of medical coding there. She joined Bayer in 1992 and took over different roles and projects in study and data management before she joined medical coding. Today, she is heading the global Bayer Medical Coding Organization and is located in Leverkusen, Germany. And as you can see in the picture, she is really highly interested in artificial intelligence, a technology which she introduced into Bayer Medical Coding already 5 years ago. So they do really have some experience, and she will present on that. Thank you, Martina. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin, for the introduction. Liz, can you make me a presenter?
Yes, you are now presenter.
Okay. Will you let me know when you see my screen? When we tested it, it took a little longer.
Yes, it's available.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Ian for these very interesting thoughts with respect to the survey. And this is a very nice transition to my presentation, because today I would like to share with you how Bayer is addressing the challenges of ever-increasing volume of data and the need for very short turnaround times. So the topic for my today's presentation is the automation in the biomedical coding process. And as you can see from the agenda, this will really cover the largest part of my presentation. Nevertheless, in order to help you to better understand our business needs and for introducing artificial intelligence, I would like to start with a short introduction of the setup and the responsibilities of the biomedical coding organization. So let me start very high level. I think what is different to many other pharmaceutical companies is that Bayer has only one central coding group in place. And this group is being responsible for the coding philosophy, the systems, and the processes. Technically, this team is being supported by Bayer's internal decision science team. These are the people we worked recently on with artificial intelligence. I will come to this. And then it's also being supported by Proficient, with whom we have a very long-term collaborative partnership. With respect to coding conventions, we maintain coding conventions for Medra, MedDRA, WHO drug, and IDF, which is for Japanese drug codes. And then, as I mentioned, what is really different to many other companies, this group is being in charge of coding of clinical trial data and pharmacovigilance data. And the way how we do code assignment is a combination of auto-coding, artificial intelligence, human involvement, but this is what I will present in more details. The systems here we have in use are Metra encoders. This is our internal coding system. It's Argus Safety, it's SAS, and it's artificial intelligence. So some more details on these topics. As I said, we have a centralized team within biopharmaceuticals responsible for clinical trial data coding and pharmacovigilance data coding. We are responsible for the coding strategies, philosophies, processes, and tools, and in close cooperation with, in particular, pharmacovigilance, we work on the maintenance of the coding conventions, synonym lists, and auto-coding algorithms. We have one set of coding conventions available, and the Medra coding conventions are based on points to consider document. We have synonym lists in place for Medra and WHO drug, which are part of the medical coding system in order to increase auto-coding hit rate and to support coding consistency. At this stage here, I can also share some metrics with you. So as I said, we are responsible for studies and pharmacovigilance. We are doing all study coding for phase 1 to 4, including non-interventional studies. And we not only do this for the internal studies, we also do this for the studies we had outsourced in data management. And that is not because we don't believe that CROs are not able to code. It's only for consistency reasons. And with respect to metrics, what does it mean? Actually, we have approximately 140 studies we run in parallel and code on a daily basis, ongoing daily basis. And from pharmacovigilance, we receive, after autocoding, approximately 2,000 terms, which need to be manually coded on a daily basis. So overall, the coding organization at Bayer is being faced with, I would say, 50,000 terms per month, which needs to be manually coded. For clinical trials, we do this by text basis. And for pharmacovigilance, we do this by patient basis. And also, we are in charge of also version update activities, which include review and update of the synonym lists and the coding conventions for both Medra and WHO drug, and also for refreshing all clinical data and the drug safety database after each Metra version update. With respect to the systems, as I said, Metra Encoder is our bespoke medical coding system, which had been developed in collaboration with Perficient. We have interfaces to Argus, to SAS. We have artificial intelligence in place. At the moment, we still have Watson from IBM. We will introduce the successor project, Holmes, which is something we have developed internally at Bayer soon. And the WHO drug coding AI system coder is under investigation at the moment. And we consider to introduce this for drug coding in the near future. So how does it look like? Here is a very high-level flowchart. Data come in from clinical trials and pharmacovigilance. We try to autocode them within Metra Encoder. What cannot be autocoded, we call this omissions, are being generated. Artificial intelligence is providing solutions for these omissions, and these solutions are being reviewed by human coders. And finally, we have then the coded data. But this is very high level. Now we'll go into the details now. What I would like to explain or describe is that we have 4 phases of the coding process, which is triggered within our in-house coding system. The first step is the autocoding algorithm. And this is a 3-stage customized coding algorithm within our coding system. And either terms can be autocoded or omissions will be generated. In the second step, artificial intelligence is taking care about the omissions which had been generated out of the autocoding algorithm. And artificial intelligence is proposing a solution. The third step is the involvement of the human coder, who will review and either accept or override the proposed solutions coming from artificial intelligence. And the last step is then the human QA, mainly important for consistency reasons. But I will come to all these steps in more detail now. So let me start with the autocoding process. This is a relatively traditional autocoding approach, has nothing to do with artificial intelligence or natural language processing or machine learning. It's completely rule-based. But this algorithm is working with 3 different steps. So we start very simple with trying to find exact matches in the dictionaries or in the company synonym lists. And we do this for Medra and WHODRUG. Then we pass the verbatims through a sequence of transformations with subsequent lookups against the dictionary terms in order to increase the likelihood of matches against the dictionaries. And in the last step, we have applied a couple of term-specific rules, in particular for body mass index and for temperature, but I will provide you with more examples on what we do in these various steps now. So the goal of the various stages is clearly to increase auto-coding hit rate, to have more auto-coded data available for training purposes with respect to machine learning. I will explain what is behind this. And also this rule-based coding approach helps machine learning propose better coding results. But let me start to explain a little bit more what we do in the transformation. I think you are all very familiar with the challenges of transformation, because very small details can really tremendously influence the coding results. So therefore, transformation is very tricky. You need to consider details with respect to singular versus plural, left versus right, unilateral versus bilateral, qualifiers, and verb inflections. And one very good example, I think, and very transparent example, what we do in the context of transformation, we consider, for example, when it is safe to remove left and right in the algorithm. So if, for example, you have arm fracture, it doesn't matter if it is left arm fracture or right arm fracture, but definitely it is not safe to remove left and right in everything what is related to heart. So this is more or less a couple of ideas what we do in the transformation process. The last step is that we have introduced term-specific rules. And what does it mean? We have converted our company coding conventions into term-specific rules within the coding algorithm. And most of these term-specific rules are related to numbers. And I think we are all in agreement that in general, we cannot simply ignore numbers when making coding decisions, but numbers can have certain meanings depending on the terms that are associated with temperature or BMI. But as I said, I will provide you with this examples in one of my next slides. So to remind you, that was the first step with the traditional autocoding algorithm. Now I would like to move into the second step with artificial intelligence. Everything what comes out of the autocoder runs through artificial intelligence. So terms that autocode also are being passed to artificial intelligence for training purposes. Terms that do not autocode generate omissions and are passed to artificial intelligence for solutions to be proposed. And as I mentioned, the solutions are then being reviewed by humans, and the final decision is returned to machine learning for training purposes. So we have often, or I have often used the word machine learning, but what do we understand and what is behind this in particular here in the coding field? So we have, initial data are being used to train a machine learning model in order to make predictions on new data without explicitly being programmed to do so. And this is a major difference to the traditional autocoding algorithms. But ongoing training is required to continuously improve the model and therefore the quality of the predictions. And I think you are all aware that significant volume of data is needed for training the model. And how have we used this in the medical coding space for our machine learning activities? So we ingested training data to the model, which consist of the reported term and the corresponding dictionary code. So legacy data we had in the past that were used for training the machine learning model. And the sources of the training data were the Medra dictionary itself, the company's synonym lists, but also the auto-coded data we had. And that is what I had often mentioned, how we facilitate the auto-coding algorithm in order to improve machine learning. So I would like to come now to what I have promised, to give some example with respect to BMI and temperature. So as you all know, as we all know, Medra dictionary does not contain ranges of what is over and what is underweight. So we definitely need to have company coding conventions who address this aspects. And what we as a company have decided in our coding conventions has now been transferred into the auto-coding algorithm. This was this third step I had mentioned to you. And this rule-based coding led to 11,000 pairs of BMI terms with codes to be available for training then machine learning. So you had then various examples as mentioned here. The patient's BMI was 50.123 or patient's BMI was 55.67. And our new artificial intelligence system called Holmes, which is the replacement of IBM Watson in the future, returns underweight for these BMI values. And how did we train machine learning to come up with these coding decisions? Yeah? And that is via the processing of the volume of training data we have ingested into Holmes. So Holmes then learned that words like patients and was are superfluous words because they were removed as part of the transformation stage in the traditional autocoding algorithm. However, the BMI text and the number are crucial for coding. Therefore, Holmes, our artificial intelligence system, has learned that BMI of 15 is underweight. Therefore, returns underweight as the proposed omission solution. We do something very similar with temperature. So, for example, if you have an as-reported term, temperature 40 degrees, Medra does not contain these kind of entries, so these terms do not autocode. We could decide between body temperature increased and pyrexia. These are two different PTs. Therefore, again, we need to have company-specific coding conventions which state which temperatures are coded to body temperature increased and which are coded to pyrexia. And these coding conventions also have been converted to term-specific rules. And these term-specific rules, again, increase the autocoding hit rate, but also improve the autocoding hit results from machine learning. I've been often asked by my management why to invest this significant effort in the traditional coding algorithm if you have also artificial intelligence and machine learning in place. And I would like to summarize the reasons here. First of all, the customized coding algorithm increase the autocoding hit rate. And whatever we autocode does not require any further intervention from humans, which means this definitely saves time. But from what I have presented to you, you have also seen that the autocoded terms are supplied to the machine learning system for training purposes. So it also will improve the coding results from machine learning in the future. The more terms that autocode, the more machine learning can learn when certain words can be ignored versus when they must not be ignored. So again, improves the coding results from machine learning. The customized coding algorithm produces cleaner data to train the machine learning because it's more consistent than what has been coded by human coders, even if it cannot autocode the term. So these were the first two steps. We still have human involvement here in the third step because machine learning technology has to be exposed to large volume of data in order to be trained. And the first few times a term is sent to be coded, the machine learning could return unusual results. So human review monitoring is definitely required. Any feedback from humans. So if a medical coder accepts what has been proposed by artificial intelligence, or if a human coder overrides what has been proposed by artificial intelligence, is feedback to the system, to the model, and trains the system further. And we still have here a human coder step involved because we definitely feel that authorities for this kind of sensitive data would not accept a true automated process. So we feel that it's a safe way to have a human coder here involved in reviewing what is being proposed. But clearly to describe to you what we had done before we introduced artificial intelligence, we always had the 4I principle. So a first human coder proposing a code, and the second human coder accepting the code, because we feel that the 4I principle is important in order to ensure the quality of the data. But to some extent, this is what we do now with artificial intelligence. The first step, we replace the human coder in the first step with artificial intelligence, but we still have the second step with a human coder to review and to accept. And then as a last step, we have a QA step, which is being performed by the physicians in our organization. We currently review 100% of adverse events and a subset of surgeries and medical history terms. And we mainly do this for consistency reasons. What were the reasons, the key reasons to introduce artificial intelligence in the first place? I think, as I mentioned, that is the ever-increasing coding volume, which means higher workload for the medical coding team. And I think we are all faced with the same situation, that it is very difficult to hire skilled employees, and then also the resource restrictions many companies have. So there is definitely the need for automation. And also, you all know that if you have very detailed coding conventions, and the complexity of the dictionaries really requires extensive training for human people. So that were more or less the key reasons for introducing artificial intelligence. Why is it that we have decided to replace IBM Watson with an in-house development with our decision science team? That is, first of all, that IBM has not communicated any plans to further improve the algorithm. And you know that we have introduced already artificial intelligence with IBM Watson in 2017. This is already quite some time ago, and technology has changed dramatically in this space. And to give you here some figures for clinical trial data. So like one more sentence to add. When we introduced IBM Watson in the medical coding space, the prediction rate for clinical trials was not as good as for pharmacovigilance. So the prediction rate for the pharmacovigilance, and there are many reasons why this was as it was higher than in clinical trials. And the prediction rate from Watson on PT level in clinical trials was 75%. And what we already see with our new development, which has been developed internally, we have already a prediction rate with 92% on PT level. And we plan to introduce this technology in January. So we are really advanced. So we know already how the figures are. We do not expect any surprises. We even feel that with the continuous feedback of medical coders, we can further increase these kind of prediction rates. What we plan to do in the future? So as I mentioned, we also look into what we can do with drugs, because we have planned homes only for Medra coded data. So we are already in contact with UMC to discuss what we can do with Hudra Coder, which could be very simply integrated with our coding system. And then we also plan in the next step how we can use artificial intelligence or machine learning in maybe in the medical review with respect to consistency checks, or what the idea would be to find certain patterns where we should focus in a more risk-based approach of the QA process. So What is the summary here? I think it was very helpful to have a centralized coding team in order to then closely work from a content perspective with the digital science team at Bayer, in order to develop these kind of systems with respect to coding algorithms and machine learning. Nevertheless, human coders will always be required. I truly believe that the involvement will be always necessary to train the system to do QA and various more things. But I also believe that there are more opportunities for further facilitating artificial intelligence in the medical coding space. So thank you for listening, and that was what I wanted to share with you today.
Yes, thank you, Martina. Great presentation and really great news on what technology can do and how an integrated approach really can have such a result, like having in clinical trials 92% of acceptance rates, because that's really a great achievement as far as I've heard from others who work in the same space. So that said, I take over for the questions and answers session.
Martin, allow me one more word. I think this was really complex, and it might be difficult for the audience to follow all individual aspects of what we are doing. But I really would like to offer that everybody can reach out to me after this call with questions, and I'm also open for any discussions how we could collaborate within industry on these kind of things.
Yeah, that's great to know, because I probably myself would contact you on some aspects there, but your offer actually already goes into answering potentially one of the first questions, because there's a question whether you have a traineeship program within biomedical coding.
I'm absolutely happy to share in various details what we are doing. And as I said, what we have developed here internally with respect to machine learning and artificial intelligence, I truly believe that not all companies need to reinvent the wheel and start from the scratch. Why shouldn't we, and therefore I really like the idea of the survey, why shouldn't we cooperate with respect to tools, technology we are using? Yeah. So I'm absolutely open for any of these discussions.
Yes, and whilst you mention actually the survey, there is another question which links kind of into that. I put this just in the chat box as well. So which differences between auto-coding system and NLP systems do you see? So what is the difference? Because the person asking was not really clear what the difference is, and I understand this puzzlement because we used words slightly different than you and others. So what's the difference between what we call an auto-coding system and actually NLP? Because NLP is an automatic system, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that is what I try to differentiate in the presentation. Yeah, so the way how we deal with this, everything what is rule based. So my buyer, from the buyer perspective, our definition is everything what is rule based and can be programmed. That is something we define as autocoding, and I would define as traditional autocoding algorithm. I mean, I try to explain what we do in these transformations. Yeah, it is simply then programming to say, if you have left in connection to arm, then please remove left. If you have right in connection to heart, please don't remove right. This is, yeah, programming language, but everything what is related to artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing is something which is not rule-based. Yeah, sometimes you do not even understand why the system is suggesting something, because you cannot check the source code or see what is a program aspect. Yeah. I'm not an expert in artificial intelligence, but if there is interest into this topic, I definitely happy to how should I say this, introduce the people from the our data science into this discussions, so that they can provide more in detail in what is really machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Great. And you mentioned something just within your answer. So actually one answer is really going over into the next question. We are seeing, again, posting this for everyone to see. And that is actually on the transformation process. So is that done by query? How do you do this transformation process?
This transformation process is also part of, so everything what I had described in the first step, which this bubble I called autocoding. There I explained that we have 3 steps of autocoding. First of all, the autocoder tries, and this is extremely simple. The autocoder tries to find a direct match in the dictionary or in the synonym list. So whatever passed the first step can then be autocoded. What cannot be autocoded in the steps comes in the transformation. And then we start with very easy things, yeah, doing upper, lower case transformation, very basic things. But in the transformation, we remove or we replace words. And what I gave this one example with left and right, but there are many more examples. Yeah, what is safe? What kind of words are safe to remove, and what are terms we can replace without changing the meaning? And you might recall the slide I had where I said, but we need to be very careful in this transformation step, because small details really change the entire concept, where I said plural versus singular. Yeah. But this, what we do in transformation is programming language. Yeah. It's really that we, from the Medra content perspective, discuss with the programmers, okay, that is safe to do, and that is not safe to do. And the validation of a coding algorithm is really a tremendous effort, because it's really something that the original idea is really to not to review what has been auto-coded by humans, because the auto-coding algorithm is validated, so we need to rely on the results. But we have recently done some changes in the auto-coding algorithm, which means that we have validated this according to our company SOPs, but nevertheless, we have the coders now also reviewing what has been auto-coded in order to ensure that everything runs correctly in this space.
Thank you. Great answer. And the next question is kind of also related to our, potentially related to our survey, and that actually asks, why are the predictions at the PT level when the goal of Medra coding is code to the best LLT?
Is this a question to me, or is this a question to Ian?
Well, I think you provided it, but potentially I actually can, because we have discussed
I can
our survey a lot.
Because I mean, it is. I think it was my way of presenting things. Yeah. I think the reason why we present this on PT level is that we have certain requirements from authority to be at least 95% correct on PT level. I could definitely provide the very same figures on LLT level. You would see then that it's a little less on LLT level. But who is interested to see these figures for artificial intelligence, I could provide these figures. It's a way how we present this internally. And I think I could recall that Ian on his slide has also more questions related to PTs, but I'm not sure.
I can come in and talk a little bit about PTs and LLTs, because we did discuss this when we were putting the survey together around how we could define what error rate was. So some organizations may consider assignment of a non-best possible LLT as an error, whereas some organizations may think that so long as the PT is correct, then that is a correct code. So it's really, I think, organization dependent on where you see the error rate. And that's why I said in the presentation on the coding survey that it is quite complex, because different organizations have different standards and ways of looking at their metrics, etc. So my opinion is that if the PT is correct, that's correct. But you have to take into account some LLTs which are maybe specific for your potential study or therapeutic area, and there may be a difference for them.
I fully agree to everything you said. I mean, from my buyer perspective, we always aim to have the closest LLT. Yeah. The way how we present it here is just, you could present both figures. Yeah. So I don't have any options for how to do this. Yeah. But I think presenting PT figures does not mean that you are not interested in LLT correctness.
Yes. And I mean, one example where the LLT really becomes important if you want to differentiate types of off-label use, because that is only separated out whether it's indication or route or kind of wrong population, kind of, or off-label population, rather, to differentiate it from medication errors. That's only captured on LLT level. So yes, you would want to have this exactly coded, but how do you do your quality statistics? And that's one of our questions in the survey, because we ended up in recognizing we are measuring at different levels. And there is no benchmarking, and to avoid for future comparison of apple and oranges, we wanted to collect these data. And I think that said, this kind of discussion already answers another question which I have put into the question pane. So yes, there are examples where the LLT is important and really makes a difference. And as the people who asked these questions really know, the aim, the target, the requirement is the LLT level. That's what we say, code at the LLT level. That's one of the first rules with Judy, isn't it?
Yeah, and that is what we expect RE to do as well. Yeah. So our goal is really to say, same as we train a coder, please find the closest available LLT. That is what we expect from the autocoding algorithm as well as from artificial intelligence. Yeah, that is the one thing. But the other thing is really, what do you really measure as an error? Yeah, and I think therefore this survey is very interesting. I mean, when Ian introduced the survey, I was really I was really glad to hear this. It was the first time that I heard this, and I'm definitely happy to participate. And I think this is really very important that we get aligned here. Yeah.
Yeah. Just one final point on that is obviously lower level terms can get promoted to preferred terms. So again, difference to code to the LLT and have a good, accurate LLT. That's the preference.
Yes, a quick question is there actually, can we share your contact details, Martina? It's one question.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's a quick one. And another question is, well, does Holmes code Medra terms from verbatim data or description as reported, or both?
From the verbatim data.
So another quick one, just need to paste it so that you all have it in writing. And always an important thing is version changes. How are version changes handled for new LRTs that are not in the corpus used for machine learning training? Is the entire corporation synonym list reviewed for better matches to new LRTs in each version?
So this is really tricky, and that was one of the challenges when we introduced IBM Watson. Definitely, as I said, the model needs to be trained based on the feedback the coders constantly give. The same is true for a new Medra version. If we receive a new Medra version, we need to train the model new on this new version. And so we need to ingest the new Medra dictionary into this. We need to update our synonym list accordingly and ingest this into the model. But there is already, there are very clear defined processes in place. And we are relatively confident that within 1 week, we have trained the model for being prepared for a new Medra version. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And another question, I think we have reversioning. So the next logical question in my thinking of a coder, one of the critical things is how do you deal with multiple concepts? So what's the splitting of terms? How does that work? How is that incorporated in the machine learning process?
We don't use this in the coding process. So this is something we, as I said, artificial intelligence is replacing the first coder. And we do not do anything different with artificial intelligence than we did with human coders. And in our bioorganization, the coders were never in charge to split terms. When we feel something needs to be split, we send this back to the data managers. So in the best case scenario, we don't receive in the first place anything which needs to be split. Yeah. So that means artificial intelligence does not need to deal with these kind of aspects.
That's a good solution. just have one verbatim code to one LLT, isn't it? That's what we all wish we have. So yes, I think we're through all your questions, Martina. But I think I personally have another question to Judy, actually, or a kind of just for a confirmation. So it's about the mapping of the ICD-10. So you said there are 3 areas of ICD you haven't mapped, but well, my personal interest is always in the indications, and I guess because they are reported in the US reports for indication, and I got a lot of D80.8 reports and questions. What is that? I don't know what it is. So those are medical conditions, aren't they? And they would be mapped, wouldn't they?
Yes, indeed. In fact, there are only 2 chapters of ICD-10 that we did not map because they weren't really relevant for pharmacovigilance purposes. The first chapter is chapter 20, I believe, external causes of morbidity and mortality. So that's a lot of very granular data involving accidents in off-road vehicles to a passenger. So concepts that really referred a lot to injury circumstances where we don't have that level of granularity in Medra. And the other chapter is chapter 21, which is factors influencing health status and contact with health services. So it contains, again, a lot of granular data about interactions with healthcare providers. This is your first visit for cervical cancer screening or a follow-up visit. Those types of interaction data are not well represented in Medra, if at all, and so we chose not to map that chapter. But all of the clinical chapters, including the codes for special purposes, which is updated on a regular basis for emergency codes, particularly pertaining to COVID-19, that chapter has also been mapped, in addition to the typical cardiovascular, GI, renal chapters, and so on. So I think your indications will be well covered.
Oh, great, thank you. Then we'll just need to wait till it's published, isn't it?
Yes. Timelines.
Anyone else having a question to Judy? I would have another one. Because well, I'm using the supplemental terms for preparing of our medical concept management, so our CMQs and so on. Right. And some of them are actually defined via selection from an SMQ. So I actually would want to know what supplemental terms would be linked to the SMQs, the existing ones. And I haven't seen that on your presentation, so.
No, currently we don't make them available. If you look at the web-based browser in the supplemental view, you will only see supplemental terms in their placement in the Medra hierarchy for English only. Our SMQ change request process is a little bit different, whereas for Medra and placement of new terms and changes within the terminology, that's done on a daily basis by our team. When it comes to SMQ change requests, we only review that at certain intervals, and it involves a large number of physicians and medical staff within the MSSO. It's a team of about 7 of us who take a look at every new PT coming into Medra, and we have about 300 or so each release, and we have to compare that against the 109 SMQs, inclusion, exclusion criteria. Does it go in as a narrow scope or a broad scope, or if it's an algorithmic SMQ? So this involves a lot of medical muscle. It's not something we can make a snap decision on a daily basis. So we typically wait to implement all of the SMQ changes at the end of a release. I think it would, our purpose for looking at making supplemental terms available, the real need is, this is a Medra term that is needed for coding and analysis. The SMQ aspect will necessarily, I think, because of the nature of our process and the intensive nature of the review needed to determine placement in the SMQs, that will necessarily probably have to wait until the official releases.
So I will have to wait for the 1st of March and the 1st of September still.
For the SMQs.
For yes. The SMQs.
Yes.
I mean, that just adds into a comment I actually have on another point, and that's kind of the continuous kind of changes in Medra, or how to change this, because what you just said, the medical muscle to apply it, if you go the way with ICD-10 and other things and have that regular updates, that would be an issue, wouldn't it? Because then if you go that way, you would have to amend the SMQs accordingly, wouldn't it? You for each new term, you would have to then exercise these medical muscles concerning the SMQs.
Yes. But with regard to the ICD-10 mapping, we're obviously looking at maintaining that on an ongoing basis. But from the ICD-10 side, it is no longer maintained by WHO. So it is what it is. Now, things might change on the Medra side. For example, if a Medra LLT that we had mapped to an ICD-10 term becomes non-current, we would necessarily have to replace that. But we expect for the ICD-10 mapping, at least to the maintenance process, to be relatively easy, and a small number of changes in the future. ICD-11, it's an evolving terminology, it's still being developed, and I think that is going to be more challenging, particularly when one considers that it's likely to be a bidirectional mapping. That's likely to be a lot more dynamic.
Just checking whether there's some more questions. I think no, and actually we're already over. We are 3 minutes over, so even though I thought we had plenty of questions, but we made them all. Thank you all the presenters. Thank you to the MSSO for providing the platform for Brian and Liz to support us technically. A special thanks again also to Brian, because he spends hours and hours of programming the survey, and that was really tricky. And actually to all the reviewers, but that's already what Ian said. And last not least, you, our listeners, thank you for having us, for following us here, and hopefully you'll provide some feedback. Let us know what you're interested in for future webinars, or also what you're interested in for the virtual meeting. Or I think we're in March. It will still be virtual, what I've heard. So for the user group meeting, but also for future meetings and webinars. That said, I need to move the slides again. A big thanks to all, and hope to see you soon somewhere else on the web or in real life soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
I'm stopping the recording now.